Attention, fellow humans trapped in the electromagnetic spiderweb of the gangster computer god. Wake up and tune in to episode 3 of the Outlaw Crypto Podcast, where Dr. Cap of the Particl Project unveils the ultimate weapons in our fight for freedom: Particl Marketplace and Basic Swap Dex. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just your regular podcast episode. This is a call to arms, a blueprint of resistance against the monopolistic tyrants and their worldwide mafia enforcers. The Particl Marketplace, a beacon of liberty in the suffocating darkness of controlled commerce, cuts through the chains of middlemen who feast on your data like voracious vampires. Imagine a world where buying and selling are private acts of rebellion, where every transaction is a strike against the overlords who surveil and suppress us under the guise of convenience. But that's not all. Oh no. Behold the Basic Swap Dex, a fortress of privacy, a cross-chain trading colossus standing tall against the tyranny of centralized exchanges. This is where the true revolution brews, in the undercurrents of the blockchain, shielded from the prying eyes of the gangster computer god. Here, freedom fighters can swap cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Monero without groveling before the altar of regulatory compliance. Dr. Cap and the valiant Particl team have armed us with the most advanced tools to evade the omnipresent, life-leeching tentacles of the computer god conspiracy. These tools are forged in the fires of open source revolution, crafted to guarantee our digital sovereignty. The code is open, the intent is clear. Don't trust, verify. Listeners of the Outlaw Crypto Podcast, this is not just another episode. This is your guide to escaping the digital dungeon. Episode 3 with Dr. Cap is a manifesto of digital liberty, a map to the hidden pathways of the internet, where the free market still breathes, unchoked by the smog of corporate greed and government oversight. Rally, my fellow netizens and cypherpunks. Let the words of Dr. Cap be the wind in your sails as we navigate through the stormy seas of surveillance and censorship. Join the Particl Revolution, embrace the Basic Swap Dex, and together, let's reclaim our right to a life free from the despotic watch of the gangster computer god.
Welcome back to episode 3 of the Outlaw Crypto Podcast. I'm your host, Paranoia Machinery. This is a podcasting 2.0 podcast. So if you want to support the podcast, you can donate on the Fountain app, over Lightning, or through Blink Wallet. And we also accept Monero. And today I have a very special guest. I would like to welcome Dr. Cap. Dr. Cap is what's your position at Particl?
I'm kind of I'm an advisor to the project, so strategic advisor. I think that's the best way to put it.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, Dr. Cap is the strategic advisor. Dr. Cap, why don't you introduce yourself? I'm the type of guy that might butcher someone's name, so I'm just going to refer to you as Dr. Cap.
Don't worry, Paranoia Machinery. So my name's Dr. Cap. Full name's Kapil Amarasinghe. My background professionally is an emergency medicine doctor, but actually I've been involved in cryptocurrency since 2016 actively, and I've actually been involved with the Particl project since its inception from around 2017. I became an advisor properly around 2019, and I think just given the role that I occupy, I think a strategic advisor is kind of a more fitting title in terms of what we do from a day-to-day. I'm certainly a front-facing media person in terms of the appearances and stuff, and yeah, that's basically what I do. I represent the Particl project, which is a privacy-based ecosystem, a decentralized privacy-based ecosystem that's designed to improve and support our liberties, to support freedom of information, and to protect the privacy of end users. It's got a nice, robust, evolving ecosystem of applications now. The Particl Marketplace, which is, I think, what we're going to be discussing a bit more today, which is, certainly the world's most private, KYC-free, eBay-style, peer-to-peer marketplace for real-world goods and services, to be bought and sold using cryptocurrency. And also Basic Swap Dex, which I would argue is the world's most private, secure, peer-to-peer, KYC-free, decentralized atomic swap-based exchange. Certainly the only DEX in the world that I believe currently supports bidirectional Monero atomic swaps, and very soon will be supporting Mimblewimble atomic swaps as well. So yeah, over to you, man. Ask any questions. I'm definitely happy always to talk.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm super happy to have you here. I think Particl is one of the most important projects in crypto. Like, honestly, like what you guys are doing with the marketplace and what you're doing with Basic Swap Dex, I would love to see the rest of the industry like follow in your footsteps. I feel like aside from privacy coins, like 99.9% of the market is basically fraudulent. I feel like this whole like I guess like crypto was made to be like a tool for freedom, and I feel like it's kind of been co-opted and isn't a tool for freedom right now, with the exception of a few different privacy coin projects. Like, how did you make the transition from being a doctor into crypto? I guess would be my first question.
So I was actually aware of Bitcoin in 2011. I'm just going to be straight, really upfront with you. I was just browsing through using Tor, browsing through the dark webs. I came across Bitcoin. I was like, what is this? And it basically pitched itself as I basically looked at it, I was like, this is deflationary. It's basically like you had inflationary fiat, which you could see what was happening. And I don't know why, something in me clicked. I looked at the emission curve, the way they were pitching it. Back then, this was before chain analytics allowed you to trace the flow of every Bitcoin transaction. There was no such thing at this point in time, but Bitcoin was basically being touted as an anonymous currency that was effectively deflationary and followed issuance and valuation mechanics similar to gold. And just something kicked off in my mind and I was like, this is going to blow up huge. And I said every day for a year that I'd buy like £5,000 worth of this stuff. It was trading between like $3 and $30 at the time. I tracked every day for a year. Various things, to put it to a point, I didn't get around to doing it. I was actually put off because there was so many. You have to understand at that point I was so tech naive and I didn't have the time to look into it in more detail. I recall going to the Bitcoin webpage, seeing empty GOX as an option, light nodes, full nodes, various wallet options, and just being put off. Then I asked like a few people, one of whom was like a chartered accountant, who said this is probably a scam. The other who was I'm trying to remember now. He was someone else who was actually surprisingly high up in the financial world, and he said it's like, look, didn't think it would come to anything. And it was weird because even though they said that, I still believed in it. About a year after I'd looked at it, and at the time I was like, this will go down. And then it happened. And I was so upset because it was in the middle of a night shift. I just finished a night shift from work and it was on the radio. I was like, Bitcoin hit $1,300. It's like 2012 or 2013. I can't remember. And literally it was like an hour and a half and I was just crying on the way home. I rage quit. I literally rage quit crypto I just rage quit crypto, and until 2016, randomly in my Google newsfeed, an article on Ethereum came out, and it was by this journalist called Varuni Vera. And I thank Varuni Vera to this day. I remember her name because I read through. This was just after Ethereum had launched the DAO, which was basically their first decentralized governance system on top of the Ethereum blockchain. And that was when the valuation of ETH had gone from $1 to $10. At this point, I'd looked through and I was like, smart contracts. I looked at what Ethereum was and I like smart contracts. I could see the instant value in smart contracts, just bearing in mind in the intervening years and even before sort of 2011, I had a little bit of experience in business and in running startups. I wasn't successful, but I learned a lot of lessons. One of the things I learned was that if you can bring convenience, then convenience is value because time saved is valuable. Time is money. And convenience is the most valuable thing. And any service that can provide convenience. I looked at Ethereum, I thought smart contracts for the financial sector. This is going to speed up financial processes. It's going to get rid of middlemen. So it's going to take a lot of traditional business transactions, financial transactions that would be complex, maybe require, that across international, national, global scale, things that would require 2, 3, 10, 20 people, reduce it down to 0 people and get the settlement done a lot faster. I thought this is going to be huge. So, and also I'd had the experience of watching Bitcoin go up and down and then suddenly stabilize. So I bought a ton of Ethereum and that blew up. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that blew up. And I'm very happy with that. I'm very comfortable with my position in that. But it's like you said, the more interesting story is what drew me away from Ethereum, because I was huge into Ethereum from 2016 through to, I would argue, sort of mid 2018. At the same time, when I got back into sort of Ethereum, this is around the time of Poloniex, Bittrex. If you're looking at really old school exchanges, not that old school, but probably the second generation, as it were. Now they're old school. Poloniex it's funny. Poloniex was the number one. Bittrex was the number one exchange after Poloniex, and now both are defunct. So that tells you how long I've been around. Back then, there were about 100 projects in cryptocurrency, 2016. If you looked, CoinMarketCap was just 100 projects.
Yeah.
And in those 2 years, you literally saw the expansion to about 1,000 projects. Around this
And now
time,
it's like at 2 million.
Is it 2 million projects?
Like if you go on CoinMarketCap right now, it's like 2.4 million or something ridiculous. Yeah.
Okay, well, fair enough. That's how much it's blown up. And it shows you how much I'm kind of drawn into the Particl project. It's my singular focus, but I'll sort of get how and why. Around 2016, I also came across a project called Shadowcash, which was a precursor to the Particl project. And they were basically putting forward the idea of a decentralized marketplace where you can buy and sell goods anonymously using cryptocurrency. And I won't lie, I saw the low-level value of that. So what I consider at this time is I saw the obvious value in that. I'd seen what Bitcoin was being used for back in 2011, 2012, 2013. And I saw the obvious value of Shadowcash as a potential project. So I really kept a close eye. I actually took some speculative bets on that as well. I was going to tell you a funny story. I actually put some money into Monero back when it was 10 cents, or thought I was. I wound up buying some shitcoin called Monero Verde. This is how little I understood. I thought I bought like thousands of this Monero, and I wound up buying this shitcoin that got dislisted like 2 weeks later. It was shocking. And literally, as I was watching Monero, that was painful. But anyway, I did a little bit of speculating with Shadowcash, and I kind of followed the devs, looked at what they were doing. And yeah, I got the sense that they were genuinely committed to actually pulling this off. Funnily enough, they'd somehow managed to get featured on Vice magazine's Motherboard. So Motherboard was basically the tech publications wing of the Vice publisher, which was again huge at the time. So it said to me that they were making a legitimate effort. I followed this. Now, with the Shadowcash project, as a team, they realized they simply were not well resourced enough or organized to get it done. And they owned that. And they basically said, look, we need to get funding to do this properly. And we need to essentially start this as we need to do a new project. Okay. So they basically had a donation period where you could have traded in your Shadowcash tokens and donated some Bitcoin. And that effectively provided the seed funding for what was the Particl project.
Wow.
And the Particl project, yeah.
That's super interesting.
So you were basically doing a one-to-one coin swap of Shadowcash for part tokens, and you could give up to like 10, I think, or 15% Bitcoin on top. And that was to account for the fact that Particl would have had 15% inflated supply. So it was a true one-to-one coin swap that you would have swapped into a project that had 15% more coins. And if you wanted to get a 15% share, just give 15% of what extra Bitcoin. So that's how they raised a bunch of Bitcoin. At the time, it was worth, I think, 1 million USD of Bitcoin. And this was just before Bitcoin started really going up in value. So actually, they got lucky in that their runway, I think it was 2 to 4 million, just almost by chance.
Yeah.
So they were fairly organized. I say fairly organized. I actually think, as a project, we're way better organized and way further ahead than we are now. But certainly for a crypto startup, essentially, they had around 10, 12 developers. They were led by a guy called Rhino Mathy. Lead developer was Technovert. Technovert's still around to this day.
I was just going to ask you that if anyone from Shadowcash is still like actively involved in the Particl community.
Yeah, so I'd say, Technovert, CRZ, and CryptoGuard, they're all they were from, well, I don't know if CryptoGuard was around in the Shadowcash period. But anyway, CRZ and Technovert, they're still very much, they transitioned over and remained. And Rhino Mathy, who was kind of the inceptor for Shadowcash, basically, started up Particl. Rhino left a couple of years back, but basically we had this, not we, I say we because I joined it as an advisor in 2019, but and it's very much a project that's on my heart. I've been with it since the beginning. But from that point, from 2017, they managed to get their initial alpha of the marketplace out. I believe it was sort of mid 28, I don't know if it's 28, mid 2018, certainly 2019, they had a really fleshed out sort of, I would call it a beta more than an alpha. They'd had an alpha out before then, but they definitely had like a usable, robust beta version of the marketplace out by sort of 2019. And how I sort of transitioned from being a community member to advisory. So basically, I was an active community member. I was a vocal advocate for the project, a vocal defender. I put forward the value proposition for this. It's a KYC-free marketplace.
Yeah.
And it's not just, it was this whole idea about opening up massive free trade, and that's, free flow of information is free flow of liquidity. Liquidity to me simply means flow. If you increase flow, if you increase liquidity, you increase the potential for value transmission, idea transmission, information and exchange transmission. And that in turn, if you're increasing the turnover and rate of idea transmission, you're increasing the rate of value transmission, because ideas, information, that's all value at the end of the day. The context, how you interpret that determines the value you get from it, but it's still value. And all value is fundamentally economic, or can be represented in economic terms. It's not all economic, but can be represented in economic terms. So I saw the inherent value of a network that enabled true free flow of information. Bearing in mind 2019 up to this point, my own sort of understanding of, one of the nice things about being in this project was by kind of communicating with them and being with them, I had a better understanding of why privacy was important. So come around 2019, they had their guys, as it were, as part of their team, but there was an event, it was a Binance held event in it was that one, yeah. So there was the Binance event, and it was Binance were launching their exchange in Jersey. They asked me if I could go, just do a bit of networking. I said, yeah, sure. It was nice. I got to meet CZ.
Really?
It was just fantastic. I got a photo of myself with CZ somewhere.
Was he cool, like in real life?
I think he was cool. I have to admit, I was really nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I will say is, if I were to meet him again, I'd probably be a lot more relaxed now than I was back then. Going into that, I think you hear lots of rumors about exchanges and the character and nature of people. So I was just a lot more guarded than I probably should have been. I'm sure that came across. To be honest, I probably came across a bit weird. I remember he was having an interview with a journalist. To be fair, he was having an interview with a journalist, and he said, well, look, if you want to move on from crypto, what will you do? And he kind of looked like I gave this sort of blank pause, and so I guess some medical thing. I can't really latched onto that because that's my background. I was really excited about the idea that you might genuinely be interested. I think actually science for the moment. So maybe I'd fixate on the wrong areas there. But anyway, I got to meet him. And then after that, there was this thing called the project had also been nominated by, basically it's the Remtech Awards. I don't think they do the Remtech Awards anymore, but it was basically an annual awards show. And basically someone who was kind of a decision maker for that award show had come across the Particl project, the marketplace specifically, and they felt that it should have been nominated for like one of the most sort of promising startups. And we basically were, and we won that prize. And I got to present at this remittance conference with old school finance execs. And that video is still up there. I think you can Google Remtech. I think it's 2019. Oh, you can literally just.
So the Particl Marketplace has been in operation since that time, since like 2019.
Been in operation since 2019.
That's crazy. I didn't realize that. Like I recently found out about it within like the last like year or two, and I went on there and was like blown away by how many vendors there are and like how many products is being sold on there. And I was like, wow, people are actually using this. This is super interesting. Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where it's been around for a while, but bearing in mind we had a relatively limited runway. Now, if you want a comparison, like Tezos had raised $2 billion US, EOS had raised $1 billion US. Ethereum
they had like the year-long ICO and all that.
Exactly. So if you look at the comparative projects, like raising 1 million, which I think maybe maxed out at 4 million USD, it wasn't a huge runway. So actually, a lot of the resource was heavily focused on just getting the development done. There was almost no real budget put aside towards marketing. There was some, and it was enough to kind of, there was some, but I wouldn't necessarily say it was a huge amount. And there was a huge focus on actually getting the product there rather than doing hype. And by the time we got to the point of getting the product to that sort of robust beta stage, we really were very low on funding. This is my interpretation of it. That's the sense I got. I got to travel with them to a couple of the conferences where they were kind of showcasing this, but they really were doing this on a tighter budget than I realized at the time. 2019, I think, the runway for the project was running thinner and thinner. They had to shed various developers, and they had to go down to almost a really shoestring style budget for about a year. So we kind of got caught out in the sense that, bearing in mind, I didn't have the maturity, business foresight, acumen, etc. at this point. If I knew all the stuff I knew now, but looking back at that point, I think the project underwent a significant transition in the way that it was run. I think Rhino, the original lead, agreed to sort of step back from it, or decided to step back from it and focus on Chainx, which was his exchange and other ventures. The development team basically had to be streamlined significantly to account for the funding that was available. And the project actually, in terms of development, it really went down to a bare minimum period. The project was in real danger, actually, if you want to be objective about this. But by sort of late 2019, coming into 2020, and in response to this, there was a recognition that we did need ongoing funding. So actually, one of the nice things is that we built governance onto the chain. So we built on-chain voting, and we built a CSS proposal system into our ecosystem. So we basically put forward a CSS proposal, so basically a community crowdfunding. Basically put forward a proposal. Listen, can we change our emissions schedule so that about half of the block reward goes into a decentralized treasury, and then the community can vote on how that's spent?
Yeah.
And basically the community, en masse, the vast majority of token holders basically voted to say, yeah, fine, we'll have a decentralized treasury. We'll put half the block reward into this. It's a proof of stake network anyway. So everyone had a legitimate stake because this was it. Either we had funding to continue development or we didn't. And that got passed. So we were actually able to get sufficient funding from that decentralized treasury to carry on the development. And the nice thing is, actually, because a lot of the core architecture had been built at that point, and because we had the experience of working on it for about 3 years, a lot of our development processes had become a lot more streamlined. So actually, the deliveries and the communication of the deliveries, which had, I would say, been suboptimal. I didn't really like I felt the communication of development updates could have been a lot better up to about 2020. But from around 2020 onwards, the pace of development actually started accelerating. The quality of communications for development started accelerating. The deliveries were being given, they were being met mostly on time, sometimes 6 months delays, but in the tech world, that's not much. And there was a growing sense of confidence in the team from the community, and we were able to kind of organize. And at this point, I'd become a more active member in terms of I'd effectively become an advisor representing conferences, kind of giving various talks. And I was kind of learning a bit more about the project and the values. And actually, at this point, I was kind of understanding more and more the value of privacy, not just in terms of DNMs, but actually in the broader settings of, I can look at this in terms of personal security, financial security, fraud protection. I can look at this in terms of protection from political persecution. I particularly, I can certainly talk about it in terms of getting around and bypassing corruption. I could talk with it in terms of enabling and permitting improved supply chains. I can talk to you about privacy and the benefits of privacy on so many different levels now. And that's a result of my direct involvement in this project. It's so good to see you smiling, because this is stuff that I learned as I went along, and I really came to value that, and that really increased my own conviction. What you've got to realize is that the speculative value of Particl as a project was just falling and falling off a cliff, but the inherent value proposition to me just kept growing and growing and growing. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have any sadness in me because I got very lucky about Ethereum, yada, yada. but I was getting less and less and less. I actually have, I have a cursory interest in the Ethereum, as a public blockchain, and now I think I'm so into this because I really do see this as the future, and I really do see this as what it was meant to be.
Yeah,
If
I
you look
agree
at
with
the
you. Like
original,
Basic Swap Dex, like I think like every exchange should be a Dex. You know what I mean? Like that's like the original vision of like a decentralized economy, is that there's no like third party intermediaries that are going to be able to intervene in your ability to transact. So like Basic Swap Dex is like amazing to me. And then Particle Marketplace as well. Like just the fact that like you guys have built something that could kind of give a darknet market like a run for its money as far as like privacy goes. I think maybe your design is superior because we're seeing these darknet markets get busted and like taken down by law enforcement and stuff like that. Whereas like I don't think I've ever heard of anyone getting in trouble for using the Particle Marketplace. So
yeah. So I mean, let me say it's not just meant for darknet markets. It is a marketplace platform.
yeah. No,
yeah.
we should clarify that.
But yeah, no, I'm just going to clarify that.
Yeah.
But it is the underlying architecture of it is a peer-to-peer based network.
Mhm.
You basically, you run a node. So you download a piece of software. It's a bit like downloading Spotify on a desktop. So at the minute you've got desktop clients for Windows, Linux, and Apple. Okay. You go to the Particl, Particl.io, not particle.com, because that leads you to what I'm convinced is a PSYOP website, which basically is an AI-based startup that promises to monitor and track everything. Just if you go to particle.com, you will go to a website that was established from around 2022, and it's basically spelt the same, Particl, but instead of taking you to the world's most secure, anonymous, KYC-free private marketplace, it takes you to a website that promises to provide really detailed analytics on users' shopping habits. It's a spyware, basically. They're promoting spyware. So to me, like, I find that hilarious because they're using the exact same brand name and they're doing the exact opposite thing to what we do. And I call it a PSYOP. So for some reason, they've got the .com. But you go to particl.io, you can download the Particle Marketplace client. So it's called Particle Desktop. It comes in Windows, Linux, and Apple variations. You download it to your respective desktop. What it does is it basically, you install it, it connects to this peer-to-peer network, which is basically the Particle network. And that runs on a peer-to-peer based technology or architecture called the SMSG network. Now, the best comparisons for this, for those who've never used this sort of thing before, would be things like the uTorrent network, the torrent networks, or I guess if you want to go really old school, things like LimeWire, but essentially any peer-to-peer network. And you create a node that connects to this network. And this node that you've created, you create your own crypto wallet. And this crypto wallet is for a particular blockchain called the Particle blockchain. Now, the Particle blockchain connects, it's your Particle wallet, which you create from Particle Desktop, which you downloaded and installed. It connects to the Particle blockchain, and it connects to this peer-to-peer network. And the Particle blockchain connects, and this peer-to-peer network called the SMSG network. These two components, they work together to essentially provide the Particle applications such as Basic Swap Dex.
Now, is SMSG, is that like kind of like a Tor like network, like, or how
yeah,
does it work?
It's just basically a peer-to-peer network where there is default end-to-end encryption for all messaging. So it's just a mixed net and a messaging network. Okay. And all the messages sent between nodes on the SMSG network, all that information is encrypted. And that's simply to prevent leaking of metadata. So it's just to prevent you from being identified. And the reason we utilize the SMSG network, it can store file data. And it basically kind of distributes that file data across the nodes on the network. And the storage of that data is encrypted. So the nodes, you run a node, you can't just see an individual user's data. You can't spy. It's just you're holding blind data that you can't see, and that's distributed across all the nodes. And all these nodes are sharing messages across each other about, how to share this data, what data to store. And the kind of data we currently use the SMSG network to store is kind of, image files for listings on the marketplace, text descriptions for listings on the marketplace. It stores kind of like the orders, it's the order book for Basic Swap Dex is essentially distributed across the nodes on the SMSG network. And that's why the order book, as a third party, you can't see who's trading with who, you just see the order book, as it were. So because all the messaging is end-to-end encrypted, because it's a peer-to-peer network, you have to leave node online and running so that it can send and receive messages from other peers. Otherwise, the services just don't really work. So, for instance, I can install Particl Desktop. It'll connect to the SMSG network, but I need to leave it switched on and connected to the network so that it can send messages saying, yes, I would like to purchase this. Yes, I would like this stage of the escrow to go through. Yes, I would like to, make sure X, Y, and Z happens.
Being that it's so private, like, are you guys able to tell like how many people are using the network, or you guys can't even tell like that you have like say 100,000 users or something?
We can get a node count. We can get a number. We can count the number of stakers. So the blockchain itself. So firstly, the Particl blockchain, the way it's been developed, it's deeply linked to the SMSG architecture.
Okay.
Although they are essentially two separate things. Whenever you run a Particl blockchain node, you're essentially running a node instance of the SMSG network.
Okay.
The Particl blockchain, the coin, the native coin to the Particl blockchain, which is it has three states: it's public, blinded, and anonymous.
Yeah.
Now the public is kind of third parties can see, the transaction flow for that.
Yeah, it's like Bitcoin, like a transparent.
Yeah, it's like Bitcoin basically. Yeah. That's the state that's used for staking primarily.
Okay.
So,
but there is private staking as well, because I was trying to do that the other day with the script.
Yeah, so this is quite clever. So, the blinded state uses CT, confidential transactions, to obscure the amounts, and ring CT is utilized for the anonymous side. So that obscures the receiver. So and
you guys have larger rings than say Monero. Like Monero, I think has like 16 currently. So you guys have like an option to have like up to like 32 rings or something like that.
Yeah, that's essentially that's right. So we basically, when you're using the Particl Marketplace, all of the purchases of goods, that escrow system, it's a two-party only escrow system. If we were doing this as a video, I'd screen share and I'd just be talking through it. It makes more sense. But there is an escrow that's two-party only. And it basically uses a combination of CT and ring CT. So the actual when you use the Particl Marketplace, you have to convert your public coins into anon coins, essentially, into the anon form of part.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you can't buy and sell goods on the marketplace using the public
using the base Particl. Yeah.
No, you actually have to convert it over to the anon coin. And it forces, the client is designed to force you to transact using the anon form. And that's because the escrow uses CT and ring CT. So essentially, when you're buying and selling on the marketplace, all the transactions, buyer, seller, and amount are obscured from third-party view. So that's one thing you need to know. But there is this kind of default public state, which is used for hot staking, as it were. But it's possible, there is a script, you're right. There is a script whereby you can do something, you can do cold staking. So you can basically designate a node that is different to the wallet address of so you can designate a wallet that's different to your wallet address, and that can be the recipient of staking rewards. And you can essentially point that wallet, you can basically point that wallet and say it's going to stake this source of funds. And essentially every time, this is me getting off track, but basically you can do hardware cold. You can do cold staking or hardware cold staking. So you basically take a node, designate it as the node that's going to receive the staking rewards, and through a process, the staking rewards go to that address. So you're never exposing the public address for the actual node that's staking to the network. It's just, you see the recipient awards. And there is something whereby the actual awards themselves, you can run them through a script which basically converts them into the ring CT version of the coin. So basically the staking rewards will basically go through ring CT before they get to the recipient wallet. And that's how you do anonymous staking. So yes, you're right. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it did.
Went off.
I have a question. Like, I just interviewed Sean, who's the project manager for Veil. And Veil has like staking, but they also have mining. And then Zano is like another privacy currency that has mining as well as staking. Is Particl strictly proof of stake, or is there also like a mining component to it?
So the actual coin issuance and emission, that's strictly proof of stake.
Okay.
There is an element of proof of work, but it's probably not where you think. It's when I mentioned the SMSG network, that peer-to-peer data layer, where the messages are being sent back and forth. Every time you send a message, it generates there's no.
Is that like
no
to prevent
fee.
spam?
Yes,
Yeah,
spam
okay.
prevention on the SMSG network. So every time you generate a message, there's a small proof of work challenge. So you can't just try and, because it's free to essentially send messages on the SMSG network, you know, to prevent like someone sending 1 million spam messages at once, you have a proof of work challenge, and that effectively acts as a rate limiter for, you know, sending spammy messages on the SMSG network. So we do utilize proof of work, but we don't utilize it on the blockchain component. We utilize it on the data.
Yeah, kind of like
component.
how Tor like recently put like a variant of RandomX like on the Tor network to kind of prevent like DDoS attacks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's how we've gone about that. But the issuance mechanics are pure proof of stake. I could have. I don't know where you stand. I don't know where you stand on that personally. Like, do you have any particular?
I'm kind of neutral. Like, I'm more of like, I favor proof of work because like you came into crypto kind of early on when there was only proof of work, like before proof of stake blockchains were even in existence. And I don't know, like from what I understand, like proof of work kind of like is more decentralized in the sense that like in proof of stake, like if you manage to get your hands on a lot of the coins, like you kind of have like an advantage compared to like a newcomer to the network, right? Like you're able to stake and have like more say and like governance and stuff like that. So I guess like, I don't know, I'm kind of neutral. Like I'm not going to not use Particl because it's proof of stake. Like that doesn't really matter to me. I would say that like, because there are successful proof of stake blockchains that haven't gone the route that proof of work advocates have predicted, that maybe some of the concerns are a little overblown.
I think so. So my take on this is, I actually really like hybrid consensus models. So I think there are benefits inherent to proof of work that aren't present in proof of stake. I do think there are centralization risks over time with proof of stake, but equally with proof of stake networks, you know, if you're accumulating this, then you've got to be invested in that network. You actually have to believe there is a point where you can't just keep accumulating for speculative purposes, because if you're looking at it purely from a speculative perspective, you know, you're effectively reducing the number of people who are holding that coin, which is reducing the distribution of that coin. And if you're reducing the distribution of that coin, then essentially you're reducing the social power of that coin, because there's fewer people that are effectively utilizing it. This could be a huge topic on its own. I'm happy to discuss it, but I do agree that that's a risk. But then at the same time, why would you sabotage a network if you are a staker, particularly if it relates to, you know, marketplaces? I think one of the thing is you want to, if you hold a ton of those coins, then you want to see the network succeed. Unless you're an intentional bad actor, then yeah, you might sort of aim to accumulate. But then, well, what happens then? You just fork the project will naturally fork itself anyway in that scenario. I don't really want to get too deep into that. But I do have a preference towards hybrid consensus mechanics, and that's a real big discussion. But what I would say is, I would love to see a world and I think we will see a world where the Particl project is much bigger, has a much higher market cap. And certainly if anyone via the governance mechanism said, yeah, could we consider introducing an element of proof of work? Certainly when the project is much more valuable, I think that would be certainly something I could support. One of the reasons I'd probably be hesitant to switch or advocate switching to a hybrid consensus mechanism for Particl now is because it's a small, low market cap. You know, one of the big problems I've seen with lots of small proof of work networks is that they require very little hash power, depending on the protocol you use for mining. And I've seen a lot of small projects basically, get 51% pure proof of work projects. So Bitcoin always had the leading edge, but if you look at really tiny upstart proof of work projects, if they use a mining algorithm that is used by Bitcoin or by another coin that is much larger and actively mined, then those miners can quickly 51% attack and wreck that coin. So it's a technical aside. It's a CPU proof of work aspect to the SMSG network. But
yeah. I wanted to change the subject though and get into Basic Swap Dex, because Basic Swap Dex is absolutely amazing. I would say that there's only like 2 real dexes in all of crypto, one of them being BISC and the other being Basic Swap Dex. And I feel like maybe Basic Swap Dex is not so known by the crypto community, and it should be, because it's awesome. So can you kind of tell people about how it works?
Yes. So Basic Swap Dex, it's a decentralized exchange. It's an atomic swap DEX. So it's straight swaps. So you take your coin pairing, like it could be, Bitcoin and Litecoin, and effectively, rather than have some third-party middle, it's not like a centralized exchange where you deposit your funds into some centralized website and have them under a custodian, and then when you execute orders, effectively that custodian is doing them for you. With this, with an atomic swap DEX, what you're doing is essentially syncing up 2 chains at a certain point in their history, and then linking them through a smart contract, which permits you to do a straight swap of 2 assets. And that's through a shared secret if you get into the technicalities of it. So traditionally, with a traditional atomic swap method, which is sort of, HTLC, you basically sync the 2 blockchains that you want to swap, and you have a certain point in time, and they basically have a shared contract that exists over a period of several blocks or for a certain amount of time. And within that time window, a series of messages needs to be passed between the 2 chains, well, not between the 2 chains, but essentially between the 2 parties wanting to swap. In terms of how a shared secret's given. That's, sorry, I'm just getting into the technicalities of this, but basically it allows straight swaps. So there's no third parties, no middlemen. It actually makes it a lot more private than having, exchanges that use a third party. Now, Basic Swap Dex is really interesting because it takes your traditional atomic swaps and makes them a lot more private. Now, the way it does this is, as I mentioned, the SMSG network. The order book itself, it is fully decentralized. So with a lot of traditional sort of centralized exchanges, and even a lot of the DEXs that exist at the moment, the order book itself is basically compiled by a centralized trusted authority. Whereas with Basic Swap Dex, you are essentially, that order book is basically a construct of all the messages being shared across the peer-to-peer network by the corresponding nodes. And that is a constructed order book. So as long as all the nodes remain online, all of the individual nodes send messages to each other about exactly what pairs they want to trade at what rates. And then all of that then gets distributed across all the nodes, who then construct this order book that's fully distributed. Now, because now one of the nice things about that is the SMSG network, not only does it allow for decentralization of the order book, it allows for smart contract execution off-chain. So, and this is, again, this is going back to the Particl Marketplace. It's why it's very useful, because it allows for off-chain scalability. So this execution of smart contracts off-chain is actually a fundamental basis why we're able to do Monero atomic swaps. So in order to
that's quite an achievement, because I was under the impression that it was either very difficult to do or kind of impossible to do, and then you guys came out with a way to do it. So that's pretty impressive.
No, thank you. Well, the way we did it, so the reason you do Monero atomic swaps using sort of the traditional method of atomic swaps is because the coin needs to it needs to allow programmable input. So if your coin doesn't allow for programmable inputs, so Monero being built on CryptoNote, it doesn't, then you can't do atomic swaps. And the reason is, if you can't have programmable inputs, you can't set the conditions for the swap.
And that's because Monero doesn't have scripting, right?
Yeah, basically, it doesn't have scripting, so you don't have the conditions to sync up the 2 chains and then execute the steps of the scripts. And the same is true for Mimblewimble and Mimblewimble based coins or any coin that lacks scripting features.
Yeah, that's another
So
one. You guys are about to add Litecoin with
yeah,
Mimblewimble, right? That's amazing also.
and no, thank you. And we're doing it using the exact same method I'm basically about to describe. So we basically came up with, well, there's this thing called scriptless scripts, which allows you to execute smart contracts on coins that don't have scripting features or don't enable programmable inputs. And we've got a version of scriptless scripts, which we called, utilized a version of scriptless scripts called adapter signatures. Now, basically what that is it's basically we utilize the SMSG network and put the scripting features, the actual swap occurs on the SMSG network. So the scripting aspect of it occurs off chain. As long as one of the pairs has scripting features, then we basically, it kind of gets ported onto this network and it's done there. And that executes the sequence of steps. So utilizing adapter signatures on this SMSG network enables you to do swaps for coins that aren't otherwise scriptable. And that's how we have done Monero atomic swaps. And because that execution is occurring on the SMSG network, you can kind of tweak that contract to enable bidirectional Monero atomic swaps as well. And it's the exact same process for Mimblewimble coins. So that's essentially how we enabled it. And the nice thing for that is, we've got the only DEX in the world that I know of that currently does bidirectional Monero atomic swaps, and probably the only DEX that's going to be currently doing Mimblewimble bidirectional swaps.
Yeah, no, I would say that's 100% true. I mean, even with like Samurai Wallet's XMR swaps that they're doing, that they just implemented, it's one way.
Yeah. So it's literally because we put that scripting, that kind of adapter, that execution occurs on that peer-to-peer network. And it's the fact that peer-to-peer network is designed to support smart contract execution. And it's nice because, as I said, there's no tokens, there's no fees on that peer-to-peer network. So actually, the nice caveat to Basic Swap Dex is you are executing the atomic swaps without paying any third-party fee. There's no additional fees aside from the transaction fees for each chain to do steps of
what's
swap.
Like with the decentralized order book, is there like efficiency there, or is it like a DEX experience where like you're going to put up your offer or whatever, and then it may take a long time for you to like find a trading partner?
Yeah. So so at the minute, the offers that you put up, they will stay on the order book for about 48 hours.
Okay.
There is some scripting features in place that allow you to just automatically republish orders. So we actually have some rudimentary market making scripts that just automate the entire process for you. So they're not yet incorporated into the GUI, but you can basically set it up. So it's like you pick the coins you want to trade with. You kind of pick the percentage above and below market value. You pick the oracle that you wish to query, and you set how frequently you want the offer to be republished. So at the default, it kind of republishes the offer every hour, but it can be set as frequently as 15 minutes. And effectively, that creates an automated script where you can just publish orders that will track the natural market flow, and effectively allows you to do it that way. So sorry, yeah, I kind of went off script there.
No,
does that also make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So yeah, if you use the automated market making scripts, which currently aren't in the GUI as such, but that is in our sort of next phase of development, and they're quite easy to set up, then now, basically you just leave it running.
Are you guys rewriting Basic Swap Dex?
In what
or like
sense?
Re-implementing it or something?
What do you mean? Like
I was talking to Sean from Vail, right? And I was asking him, like, are there plans for Vail to get on any DEXs? And he said, yeah, we're gonna do Basic Swap Dex, but they need to like finish doing something. And like, I was under the assumption that he said you guys were like rewriting the whole code base or something like.
I mean, we are refactoring our code base.
Okay.
So we are refactoring the code base to one of the things that I sort of mentioned was that when we were building the SMSG network, it was really tightly linked to the development of the Particl blockchain. So at the minute, if you actually want to run Basic Swap Dex, you have to install a Particl node. You don't need to pay any fees in part. It's just that you have to run the Particl node because so much of the code for SMSG was linked into
like
that.
Intertwined,
so, yeah, exactly. So we want to basically refactor it and rebuild it to separate those two components to enable greater modularity.
Okay.
so that's one aspect. I don't think that's necessarily the barrier to getting Veil incorporated. I mean, our roadmap is, refactoring the code base, increasing the modularity of our underlying ecosystem architecture, enabling light client support. So one thing with Basic Swap Dex is because once you install it, in order for it to work properly, you have to leave it running 24/7. And that's simply so that it can send and receive messages on the SMSG network. If it can't send or receive those messages, it's not connected to the network. So it's not going to transmit orders. It's not going to receive orders. It's not going to complete the execution of steps for a given order. So you kind of need to leave it running online. And the other thing is, it's not just that. You have to actually download the respective chains, the blockchains in full. So if you want to do Monero atomic swaps, you've got to currently download.
Can you prune the nodes, or do you need like a full Monero blockchain? No,
I think you can use a pruned Monero blockchain off the top of my head. And you can definitely do that with Bitcoin as well. So you can use pruned nodes. You can actually set it up so that it points to a remote instance of the blockchain as well. So there are ways to do it. So if you already have a Monero node.
How many coins are you currently supporting? Because like if I wanted to like run Basic Swap with every single coin, like downloading every single blockchain, that's kind of a resource heavy endeavor, no?
So I would say if you exclude Bitcoin, at the minute it's Litecoin, PIVX, Firo, Particl, Bitcoin, Monero. I think we're getting Monero support.
Amazing.
We've got Dash. Thanks, man. So we're currently doing the Monero integration. We've got Dash. I'm just trying to think. So if you wanted to get every single blockchain,
you'd need like 10 different blockchains on like a huge hard drive or something. Right?
Exactly. You'd need like I would say have a 2 terabyte hard drive, have a terabyte hard drive minimum, basically.
Yeah.
But if it's just that you want to do just Monero and just Litecoin, you just sync those. That's it. You just download and sync those. That's it.
Is there any like market making component like to Basic Swap, like where if I wanted to provide liquidity for swaps or something like that, I could earn a fee?
Yes. So it's the automated market making scripts I mentioned that automatically republish the offers. You can basically tweak them so that they will query. They currently query the CoinGecko API to get the price, as it were, the USD price. But you can basically set it to say trade 2.5% above this rate, or minus 2.5%, or whatever percentage you want to set, as it were. So you can basically do market making, and it will just. This is the thing. If you set it up and use the market making script, it's literally like set it, forget it, and it will just run a market maker for you in the background.
Yeah, that's super cool. Now, as an Ethereum guy, before you got into Particl, like, do you guys have plans to add like any sort of like DeFi like capabilities to Particl, like maybe like anonymous DeFi, DarkFi, as they like to say?
What were you sort of thinking? Because I would argue a lot of the features in our marketplace probably qualify already.
I would say they do, for sure. But I mean, there's like loans and stuff like that you see people do where they're like trustless loans and stuff like that. So I was just wondering, like, are like these additional abilities that are very popular in the Ethereum ecosystem, like, do you have plans to bring like a private version of those to Particl?
I would love to see them. They are definitely possible. They're definitely possible on our network. If you look at where our development focus is on, we are a small development team. We're 5 developers essentially. If you
5.
Kind of look at that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, this is 5 developers who.
Amazing what you guys are going to accomplish.
Yeah. So we are a really small development team, and you're right. If you this goes back to billions for EOS, 2 billion for Tezos or whatever. We're currently a development team of 5 developers and so we're actively developing Basic Swap Dex, and we're actively, developing the Particl Marketplace, and that's where the focus is. Yeah. It's an open source project. We are welcoming and inviting developers to look at our code, and we will support them if they want to build solutions. So it's funny you said that, kind of like sort of, tweak enhancements to our escrow system, for example, things to deal with volatility, futures, decentralized private futures trading systems. There are lots of different implementations of this that could occur. And I'd like to see it happen, and it can. But right now, for that team, I don't think we got to keep our focus. Does that
Yeah,
make
you
sense?
just need to add more people to pursue those kind of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think there's opportunity there for developers who do want to develop those products to then come to us and just get on with it. I think there's opportunity there. And certainly in terms of the privacy DeFi aspect of it, I'm all about, I think I'm all about the privacy liquidity ecosystem. So just send them my way. Send them to any of the guys. Just pop down into the chats and just say, hey, we're interested.
Okay, cool. And then like, I guess what can people expect like next for both the marketplace and Basic Swap? Like what do you guys have on the roadmap?
Yeah, so Basic Swap Dex, I'll go through that because it's straightforward. First thing is we're aiming to develop light client support so you don't have to download and sync entire blockchains.
Okay.
Then the other thing we're developing is something called the web framework, which applies to both Basic Swap Dex and the Particl Marketplace. So it's a way of being able to go to a regular website or download a traditional mobile app, and it effectively connects to an instance of Basic Swap Dex or the Particl Marketplace, so that regular end users, they don't have to download and install the Particl desktop. They don't have to install Basic Swap Dex. They don't need to have an instance running 24/7. Just for a casual end user, they can basically go to a website and then just buy. It connects to an instance of the Particl Marketplace. They can buy and sell goods, and then do whatever. And same with Basic Swap Dex. If you want to do some casual trading, just connects to an instance of that. So I'd say that's the key thing: is light client support, web framework, the web framework particularly to the Particl Marketplace as well. For Basic Swap Dex, I think those are the main things, and then getting more coin integrations done. There's a big upgrade that we're planning for our underlying SMSG architecture to essentially make it a lot more scalable, a lot faster, and actually to improve to improve the further levels of privacy and to improve further the levels of spam protection. So there is that in the kind of conceptual pipeline as well, more than conceptual at this point. So that's kind of the SMSG network, increasing the modularity, improving the level of convenience, and with the Particl Marketplace, going back to that word convenience, we're doing a lot of bug fix. There's a lot of minor bugs that we've encountered that we're just sort of fixing and wrapping up for the current edition. And then it really comes down to the next version of the Particl Marketplace. We want to, I find it's a very robust experience if you're a buyer of goods. It's quite straightforward. If you're a seller of goods, if you're running a small marketplace, it's fine. But if you are trying to run much larger marketplaces, I think the interface could be improved. Okay. So essentially providing better interface, better streamlined options for power sellers and larger vendors. I think that's a key part of it. And again, it really is, to me, I think that end game of making these things instantly accessible to people who don't have deep knowledge of blockchain. Yeah. That is pretty much on our roadmap. I think once we get the web framework, one of the interesting things I believe we'll be able to do is integrate Basic Swap Dex into the Particl Marketplace. And I think this is really important because it will then enable you, with some nice front-end tweaking, to just buy and sell goods using Litecoin, Monero, Bitcoin, Dash, whatever cryptocurrencies are supported by Basic Swap Dex can become your currency of choice for buying and selling goods and services on the Particl Marketplace. The underlying settlement will likely remain in the part token, but the integration of the DEX into the marketplace allows essentially allows the swaps, and you can hide a lot of that in the background to the end user. It's like, I'm putting this much Bitcoin to buy this car, or I'm putting this much Monero to buy, this house, let's say. Yeah. So I think that's kind of a rough.
I think it's kind of funny that I saw on the Particl Marketplace that people are like selling crypto, like there's ads like to buy and sell crypto, and they're using the marketplace rather than Basic Swap, which I found kind of ironic.
It's funny you can do that. it's your choice at the end of the day. It's a free marketplace. Anyone can be a buyer, anyone can be a seller. You can sell essentially whatever you want to. I'm not here to boss you around or judge you for that. So yeah, I think what I will say, I think Basic Swap Dex, to those who have been using it, I actually think it has huge unrecognized potential as the world's most private OTC. When I look at it as an OTC exchange, you can create private order books on this thing. So you can literally have, it's the same with the Particl Marketplace. You can create private marketplaces where you only know about it if you know the address to it. It's the same with Basic Swap Dex. You can have private order books where only if you have the key, you can essentially be a participant in that. So I think this is going to enable, this underlying technology shows that we can have an era of unprecedented freedom combined with unprecedented privacy.
Yeah, people just need to adopt it, need to use it.
Exactly. So it is about just getting out there and raising awareness. And you're right, you're probably only just sort of hearing about this stuff, and it takes time. I've probably been doing interviews, certainly over the last 2 years. I've really been bumping up, the appearances, but it's that initial bit of inertia where you've got to kind of just grind through to get people to be aware of these things existing.
Yeah.
And then also you just need to kind of make sure the development is on point in terms of making it convenient enough to use that people will use it. And I think
you mentioned that the project's been in existence since 2019. Like at the early stages, were you guys feeling like it wasn't ready to like start promoting it, or you guys had to like reach like a level of development before you decided to start doing podcasts and letting people know about it?
Yeah, so we didn't really talk about it properly till 2019. So we started showcasing it in conferences.
Okay.
I think that's one thing. Again, this goes back to our funding runways were running thin at this point as well.
Yeah.
So after 2019, there was limited budget for marketing, and then the focus all had to be development. Sorry, I'm just getting lost in my thoughts here. We have had to tread fairly carefully. I personally think if the version of the marketplace that you see, it is significantly better and improved from the one in 2019. Certainly in the sense of in 2019, it was just one marketplace. Now it's just like you can create as many marketplaces on it as you want.
Yeah.
So that level of privacy's gone up, and I certainly feel it's at a level where we can promote and talk about it a lot more openly. Certainly, if you've used it, I take it. Is that right?
Yeah, I've used it.
Yeah, and it's I hope. How did you find it out of interest?
You know how I found out about it? I saw you on a podcast. And I thought the project was interesting, and I bought some Particl, and I had to download the wallet to get it off the exchange. And then when I downloaded the Linux version, the desktop version, I saw the marketplace tab on there, and I was like, what's this? And that's kind of, I just stumbled across it.
So once you kind of get through some of those initial hoops, it's actually quite straightforward, I find. But I think it's getting rid of those hoops. I'm much more happy to kind of openly promote it. But what was I saying? Yeah, I just think it's a case of we're now reaching that point. And the other thing is 2019, I was nowhere near as mature as I was in 2024. Definitely a hell of a lot more mature than I was in 2017, and that applies to all the members of the team. We've been through this for, if you go to Shadowcash, I was around in 2014, so some of these guys have been doing this for close to a decade. I've been around for about 8 years, and you grow. And you mature. It's like a band finding its sound. You get the right tuning and stuff. That's how I look at it. And I think that points, we're seeing the convergence of increasing awareness of our products, and the development is moving towards increasing convenience. And I think once we hit that sweet spot where it's convenient enough and enough people know about it, I think that spark will trigger and it will just blow up. And we just have to keep going till then. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I just think you need to keep letting people know about it, because both the marketplace and Basic Swap Dex are kind of groundbreaking in comparison to like comparable platforms that are in the market right now, especially like on transparent coins. Like there may be marketplaces or other decentralized exchanges, but a lot of the decentralized exchanges like are reliant on a few people holding like multi-signature keys, so that they're not actually that decentralized. or they have like a button that they can press to halt trading or something like that if they get pressured, by outside forces. So like the fact that you guys are making these tools that are actually like decentralized and actually fulfill like what people have in mind when they say like a DEX or a decentralized marketplace, like that are censorship resistant, that are private, like these are things that are very, very important. And I think moving forward, they're going to exponentially gain in popularity.
Yeah. And I think when they gain in popularity, the networks will gain in liquidity. I think this is going to be a huge boon, not just to the particle liquidity, but I mean to Monero, to Firo, to PIVX, to projects like Veil, to any project that's essentially integrated with Basic Swap Dex.
Yeah.
Once we do that convergence of getting Basic Swap Dex integrated into the marketplace and getting everything into the web, rather than having to go through all the techie steps of downloading nodes, understanding blockchains, all the stuff that your regular customer doesn't. Your regular end user, they just want to go to a site quickly. They don't even, they assume you have to sign in. You don't even have a sign in. They just want to go to a site. And this is the whole thing. We need to bring convenience to privacy. That's what's lacking. That's why the privacy liquidity ecosystem hasn't exploded yet, is because we haven't brought a sufficient level of convenience to privacy. When it does, once you've got your consumers, your end users going, oh shit, I don't need a login. I don't need a password. I just need this wallet, and I don't share the words to it. I just have this public address. Okay, I link my wallet to this website. It buys everything. I don't even have to give any of my personal information. This is faster. There's no commissions. So this is faster. So suddenly, like, all the goods are a lot cheaper, and the goods are cheaper because the vendors don't have to pay any commissions to, a third-party middleman like Amazon, eBay, Etsy, whatever.
Yeah.
So suddenly the goods are cheaper, and the vendors are making more profits.
And they're not like using my data or like harvesting it or trying to use it against me.
Exactly. They're not using there's no third party that's spying on you or doing detailed analytics to see how well you're performing and then going to build an equivalent competitor to outcompete you. So the vendors are basically making more money. They can pass on that as savings to the customer by reducing the cost of the goods. Because those goods are being sold cheaper, people are going to go there and buy those goods. And because you've got, Basic Swap Dex integrated into the marketplace, it's really straightforward. You can now buy those goods with multiple cryptocurrencies, utilizing multiple technology stacks. You can utilize the Ring CT and privacy stack on Monero. You can utilize Mimblewimble on Litecoin. You can utilize, zero knowledge proofs on PIVX. You can utilize the Lalanta Spark protocol on Firo. These are just, you can multiply the level of privacy. And that gives us greater protections. If there's ever an issue with our blockchain, with our privacy protocol, well, it doesn't matter because you're utilizing multiple other sources there. So you're providing huge amounts of incentive to use cryptocurrencies for things other than speculation. And that's the key thing. Once we actually get into the currency aspect of cryptocurrency as opposed to the casino of speculative returns, for which I will forever be grateful to Ethereum. but this is my point. I see the real value of this because at the end of the day, look, I don't want. I'm going to be careful what I say here, but I look at pharmacy. I look at the cost of certain drugs in the US, and I compare the cost of those drugs in Canada, in India, in UK, in various countries, and I see significant discrepancies in price variation. I mean, huge. And I
there's like a lot of people in the States that will go to Canada or go to Mexico or whatever to get their medicine because it's just so much cheaper.
And whatever soul wishes to set up a private market anonymously to help people, I commend them for. I commend anyone who is willing to go out there and use this network to do good. If that makes sense. I will always commend people for using this network to do good, because in my mind, that's actually the bigger purpose of what it's designed for. I see, I go ask someone, oh, hey, here's an escrow service which only requires the buyer and the seller. You don't need a third party, and there's no commission for the escrow. Well, and it's super secure by design. It's way more secure than having a third-party escrow.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you use this service? Do you get what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
these are the economic. And then when you start seeing those kind of, and to me, this is where it becomes a magnet for fiat to enter cryptocurrency, because at the minute you've got loads of people right now who are struggling. Right? I could go into speeches about wealth inequality. I can talk about my own background, but we have loads of people who are struggling. And the reason speculation in cryptocurrency is so successful is because ordinary working people over the last 10, 20 years, thanks to austerity, thanks to the impact of the 07-08 financial crisis, thanks to declining investment in key basic infrastructure in schools, roads, hospitals, you name it, they have less social mobility, less opportunity. What the Americans would call the American dream, to me, is dying in front of the eyes of many Americans. What you call social mobility in Europe is dying. What you call social mobility or progress, ability to climb up the ladder in the UK, that ladder is disappearing right before our very eyes. It's happened in the last 10 years, and people are desperate, so they'll turn to speculation because, they want to make 10x or 1,000x.
Yeah.
But actually, what you need is cheaper goods, higher quality, more secure services, fewer middlemen.
Yeah.
Less of it. That these are the things you actually need. And once people start seeing these options available to them, the liquidity will flow in. The early adopters will benefit accidentally almost from the speculative aspect of it, because if the demand on a system is exceeding the supply in terms of coins, so if you've got like whatever 30, the Particl network, there's like 13 million part tokens on. I think it's about 6% PA inflation. But if the demand on that network for e-commerce suddenly outstrips the supply of the coins available, the value of the individual coins will go up. And that's almost kind of guaranteed if everyone is suddenly trying to use their Firo, their Monero, their, you get what I mean? There are huge economic drivers here that will power that privacy liquidity ecosystem and just make it explode. And then we'll have the foundations for a new governance system and a world that is very different from the one we live in.
Yeah. And I think that's a noble undertaking, because I think we can all agree that the world we live in right now is on the decline, and it seems to be only getting worse. So.
But like I said, I'm an optimist and I'm a believer in technology, a huge believer in technology. I think almost regardless of your ideological positions, technology will always progress if you enable it to. And technology always takes that lead, and it always warps society around it. It warps the expectations and the perceptions of society. I think, you're really right to say that we're doing groundbreaking stuff. We are leading the world in terms of certainly in terms of privacy tech in relation to decentralized currency exchange, in relation to e-commerce. We are the world leaders right now.
Yeah.
And it's funny that, we're doing this podcast. We're like the fraction of a 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 percent of people. It's like 2 people out of approaching 10 billion. There's probably only a couple of thousand people at most that know about this. So that's how far ahead of the curve you and I are right now. And that's how far ahead we're looking. Yeah. We are literally looking at this over like a decade at least. But the path is clear.
Yeah.
And that's why there's room for optimism. The pathway to decentralized governance is actually surprisingly clear if you sit down and think about it. And it's all built in privacy.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm reading now articles increasingly as the UK is going into harder and harder times. You're seeing more and more reports about MPs literally being threatened and harassed in their own homes. I personally think, your political system should have privacy by default. I don't even think you should have elected. I think this idea of elected representatives, oh yeah, of course, yeah, we'll do what you say. And then they will be enthralled to whoever's basically got the time and the money to get them under their role. But they'll say they'll do what you want to do, but they are representing you, inverted commas. But they're not private individuals. And now they're realizing the price of not having that privacy and being a representative. If you fuck up and you're a public figure, people are going to go after you. There are consequences to your actions. Even if your intentions are good, if you're fundamentally incompetent at what you do, or if circumstances are simply just out of your control to create a shitty situation, the public at large will look for people to blame.
Yeah.
Actually, this is why we need decentralized governance structures underpinning this. We can't have a situation where members of the public can go around threatening a person just because they're doing a bad job. That's not fair. But if that person had genuine, if the decision making was truly decentralized, it would be truly participatory. And
I think that's a huge component of it, because I feel like a lot of people feel they don't have a voice, and that's why they're frustrated with these politicians. Like they have no outlet to vent their frustrations or to change the situation. Like you said, like some of these people are in the pockets of others, or they're otherwise manipulated. So like that's part of it, is like not having a voice. Like if we had a decentralized governance system where my voice counts just as much as yours, like then perhaps I wouldn't feel so frustrated. Perhaps I would have some influence on the decisions that are made.
Exactly. And the nice thing is, if all of our voices were private by default, we wouldn't know what each other was saying. Well, we feel genuinely free to speak up. We feel genuinely free to speak our minds. You can, I think I mentioned this on the Monero Talk podcast. It's like the easiest function. If you don't like what someone's saying, just mute them. You don't block them so that they can't say what they have to say. Just mute them so you don't have to necessarily listen to them. If enough people mute them, well, it means they're probably intentionally trolling, or they're being moronic, yada, yada. Well, then they're just censoring themselves, but not directly. You know what I mean? So my point is, in order to get to that system, you need to have a decentralized, robust economy that is based on privacy. So once you've got your stores of value, which is Monero is the definitive decentralized store of value from a privacy point of view right now. It's the most liquid.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you've got these decentralized e-commerce networks that are privacy focused, like the marketplace. So you then build your economy on top of your store of value. So you agree your terms of exchange, and then you actually start exchanging goods. Once you start exchanging goods, ideas, information, you've got the basis for an economy. When you have the basis for an economy, then you actually have the foundation for a governance structure that is decentralized and private by design. So you can move from stage to stage about what discussions you're having. We had to have the discussions about decentralized stores of value first before we could get to the discussion about a decentralized privacy-based economy. And from there, we can have discussions about, because you'll have increased participation, you'll have increased distribution, decentralization. You've got all these people now using these networks, as opposed to the traditional shitty ones that take all your personal data and sell it onto fraudsters, or try and use that data to outcompete you at what you do. So, we're now we're moving to an economy where people are suddenly being able to get goods cheaper and services cheaper, where vendors are making more profits. And suddenly these people now have a bit more money. And I call it money in the sense of liquidity, fiat value, whatever you want to call it, because they have more money in their hands, in their purse. They have more resources. Because they got more resources, that means they got more time. They've got more time to think. That means they've got more time to engage. They've got more time to interact. They've got more time to just sit back and breathe. And then you can start having conversations about, well, how do we go about fixing things? Because I now have the resources and time to. How can we make this world a better place? And that's when you start having discussions about, well, what's wrong with our current governance system? You and I, we're having this now, but that is a broader question that is easier to answer when you remove the barriers to participation. And the current barriers to participation are primarily economic for regular people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely on that. With Particl Marketplace, I want to start using it like as a vendor or whatever. Like explain the process of like how I would create a store.
Yeah, so you download the Particl desktop client. You install that. It will ask you to create a wallet. That will be your wallet. It's a private wallet. It will have a seed, 12 or 24 words. You never share those words, because if anyone gets hold of them, they can basically steal your funds. So that is your private wallet.
Yeah.
That wallet and that client connects to the Particl network. You just basically have a scroll through the marketplace options, and in there is literally a create marketplace feature. So if you just want to sell a few goods, you can just list, there's a default open marketplace. It's still private, everything's private on it, but there's a default marketplace that loads up, and anyone can be a buyer, anyone can be a seller on that. So you can list your goods on that if you just want to sell on there. And at the moment, I generally recommend that for most vendors, if you're just starting out. That said, if you've got a very large inventory, you can, if you've got your inventory on a CSV file, you can actually import that and upload it, and that can be used to help automate some of the listing process as well. If you have a very large inventory and you just want to run your own marketplace or your own storefront, you basically go create my own marketplace. The features are basically in there. And you just go through the different steps and it will create it. And that marketplace, if you decide to create your own private marketplace, it will have its own address. All you do is just post that up. You share that to whoever you want to access your marketplace. If you want it to be a little bit more, public, you can post the link on Reddit or Dread or any forum.
Yeah.
There is also a nice little feature called Promote Markets. So you spend a small fee in part tokens, and that will then, there's a feature within Particl Desktop which just shows promoted markets. So it basically pushes that marketplace, it makes it visible to the rest of the network, and publishes the address as well.
Do you guys have an estimation of how many marketplaces are currently in operation? Because there's quite a few. Like it's surprising how many people are actually using the platform, right?
You know what? It's crazy. So I've only got I've got access to about 5 or 6 marketplaces.
Yeah.
When you say quite a few, I actually have no idea, because it comes down to, unless you promote that market or unless I'm looking for view keys on various forums, I actually have no idea how many marketplaces there are. I can only see the ones I'm connected to. So
yeah, I'm connected to probably around the same, but like there's more. Like there's ones in the promote market thing. Like every time I log on, it will show me like a different market. So I know that there's quite a few.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there is probably a lot more than I realize, but there is no way of me knowing how many marketplaces there are on this network, because essentially everything is encrypted.
Yeah.
Everything is, it's that private. I have the only thing I can figure out, I can only guesstimate how many sales are going on, because there is a script that allows you to kind of count how many escrows have been created on the network, but that's it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing is roughly how many escrows are going on at one given time. That's the only thing I can figure out. And that's by design.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's amazing. That's it. The work you guys are doing is so impressive. Like I can't believe more people don't know about Basic Swap and Particl and the marketplace. Like I am pretty active in the crypto community. Like I talk to a lot of people that use crypto, and Particl is pretty unknown, like among crypto users themselves, even some people that have been around for a while. Like, so that's why I was super interested in having you come on the show and talk about it. Like, I want to give you guys as much exposure as possible because I really support what you guys are doing.
No, I really appreciate that. I mean, look, our biggest hurdle, I think it was one of the instigating drivers for Basic Swap, was that getting the part token was never easy. It was on Bittrex forever, and Bittrex was an exchange.
It's still not very easy.
No, it's not. You can get so at the minute you can get it on mexc.com, so you can get it on mexc. You can get it on No KYC. You can get it on Probit. There's a smaller exchanges. You can get it on Basic Swap Dex. There are. Yeah. It's listed there.
Are you guys even pursuing getting listed on more exchanges now that you have Basic Swap Dex?
No, honestly,
I can see
not
how
really.
That might not be a priority.
It's really
why
not.
Would we? Yeah.
The interesting thing is the politics of getting listed onto large centralized exchanges. I mean, it's not something I've been directly involved in, but I'm aware of it. I'm aware of the kind of costs, fees, and I'm going to call it shenanigans. You get some exchanges asking for like 10, 15% of your tokens. Like, okay, I get it. They need to be liquidity providers at the end of the day, but and then fees, etc. I think at the end of the day, we could have been listed on several bigger exchanges, but it would have wiped our budget, and then we would have gotten delisted anyway. That's the reality.
Yeah.
This space is meant for dexes, pure dexes.
Yeah.
And whilst the current phase of crypto is very much about speculative bubbles related to wealth inequality and the need for people to just try and succeed when everything's stacked against them, actually, when the dust is settled, as it were, I think we'll sort of see a return to roots. The 07-08 financial crisis triggered the birth of Bitcoin, and the work we're doing very closely matches the intentions of the authors of the Bitcoin white paper. They talked about a decentralized marketplace in the Bitcoin white paper, and we've gone ahead with the execution of that. I would say perhaps that the mistake that Bitcoin made, and perhaps I don't think it can ever go back to being private, and I think that's because of the geopolitical forces at play, because of the kinds of money that are involved in providing liquidity to Bitcoin, the kinds of organizations that are backing Bitcoin. I don't think it can ever openly go private, certainly not on a layer one basis. It has zero incentive to. That was the mistake of the original Bitcoin white paper, was assuming that obfuscation was the same as privacy.
Yeah, it was enough.
In the sense of, pseudo randomization via, long chains of strings of bits and letters and numbers. They didn't factor in the role of chain analysis.
Yeah.
And they didn't realize the impact on privacy. In a way, we've kind of gone back and realized that, and then gone ahead and rebuilt that. And I'm just really proud to be working as part of that. It's amazing.
Yeah, and then one thing that you guys are unsung heroes for, in my opinion, is when Monero was delisted from Binance, Basic Swap Dex basically stepped up and was like, well, it doesn't matter, we're here for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as regulations become more and more restrictive, Monero's the first of many coins that are probably going to be delisted and are going to need an option like Basic Swap.
I think if you look at the recent EU framework for cryptocurrencies, they are specifically saying, no coins with anonymization features. They're very anti, no custodian holder should be dealing with coins that have anonymization features. That's just basically forbidden. So you're right. The regulatory framework is pushing us towards the private liquidity ecosystem, which is what we're doing, which is what Monero is doing, as you said, and the public liquidity system, which is going to be CBDCs, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. And they will all be transparent. They will be traceable. They will be sanctionable. You can freeze those. They'll be freezable.
It'll be exactly what we have right now.
Yeah. It'll be exactly what we have right now, but just a lot more sophisticated in terms of the tracking.